just my daughter put up that big sign. There are 4 cats. Make sure you count. There's 4 cats. They would have it and just go to the door and get paralyzed in the hallway. Like, where am I? It's such a bummer. Well, at least you know
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I would like to call this special school board meeting to order. Member Arla, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. David, can I have a mic? Yes, thank you. I am here. Member Johnston. Chair Kirby.
Here.
Member Leffler-Kemp.
Here.
Member Oswald.
Here.
Member Sandsted.
Here.
Member Welty. Here. Superintendent Gronseth.
Here.
Deputy Clerk Hassler.
Here.
Secretary Dolans. Here. And our student representatives are excused. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. According to our agenda, are there any audience things? These should be limited to issues on the agenda for this meeting. Member Welty.
Chair Kirby, the superintendent just leaned over and said, we usually say the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we do it for special committee meetings? I don't know if we have provisions for that, but perhaps we should stick with the old routine and do that. And
If you want, that's fine with me.
all right.
All right. Let's stand and do the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There. All right. Thank you. Our agenda then. First item is our 10-year capital facilities plan and proposed financing. Perhaps, Mr. Spooner, can you? Mr. Hassler, can you? The wrong one here. Where are we? Here we go. There we go.
If I could make a few introductory comments.
You may.
The board packet includes a lot of information tonight, including communication from me. Just to kind of frame the discussion tonight, there are a couple of projects that have developed a high priority in recent months. Projects that were not identified when our budgets were put in place a year ago. And among those projects would include the playground fall protection work that is still being investigated, and Rockridge School improvements. Those two projects, plus all of the other projects that were identified as part of our LTFM project, you put all the costs of those together, and the cost of doing that work is greater than what our available revenue is at this time. We have investigated financing options over recent months, and I believe that financing is an option that we should consider if it is going to be the case that we continue to want to do the work that we had previously planned to do, as well as the projects that have developed a priority in recent months. The financing that is being proposed is financing that would involve the sale of bonds. Most of those bonds, about $3.64 million worth of those bonds, would be considered facilities maintenance bonds that are for LTFM long-term facilities maintenance projects and would be financed by LTFM revenue. And certain amount of the costs relating to the Rockridge School improvements are not allowable LTFM costs, and those would need to be paid out of our capital facilities within our general fund. And those bonds would add up to about $615,000. There's a number of things that would be necessary for us to do if it is the case that we want to move forward with financing of these projects. And among those things would include, we need to have an updated LTFM plan, and your packet includes one, an updated LTFM plan that incorporates the projects that were not identified a year ago, and those would include Rockridge School and the playground fall protection projects. There is a resolution that goes along with that LTFM plan, and there are also two resolutions for the different bond issues that would be proposed. One would be a general obligation facilities maintenance bond. The other would be a general obligation capital facilities bond. We would need to publish legal notice prior to the sale of those bonds, and we would need to submit our LTFM plan and the proposed financing to the Minnesota Department of Education for the Commissioner to review and approve. All of those things would need to happen before we could sell bonds. There is interest cost and cost of issuance whenever one gets into the business of financing projects like this. Those costs would be payable both under our LTFM fund and revenue, as well as our capital facilities, which falls within our general fund. Those costs would be paid back over the course of 5 years. If we do not feel like the financing is worth taking on those financing related costs, we would have to either eliminate or delay some of the projects that we're looking at here. The information in your packet includes an LTFM plan that Dave Spooner has put a lot of time and effort into preparing for you. There's also a presentation document that Steve Pumper from PMA has prepared. Steve is with us here this afternoon, and he will be presenting his presentation document after Dave has done his LTFM. I have been calling upon the expertise of Bob Tofty, legal counsel, to assist us in this process, and Michael Hart and Greg Boffield from Northland Securities. At this point, I'm going to hand the program over to Dave Spooner.
As Mr. Hassler mentioned, with the recent additions of projects for FY18, I have revisited the plan and I've added some projects into FY18 and FY19. I won't go verbatim over the document which you have in front of you, but I would like to touch on some high points. Starting with page number 6, this plan should never be considered all-inclusive. It's an ongoing living document that we continually evaluate. Page 7 is the table of contents, and then we'll get into section 1. And this is probably very familiar to you as you've seen it each year, but I just wanted to touch on how this plan is developed. And we have 4 primary items in which we look at, and the first is state fire marshal orders. That helps us develop the plan. We visit and speak with principals and building administrative staff to see what their needs are. Projects are developed through assessments in my department and facilities. We look at the buildings, we look at the sites, we look at the roofs, we assess the buildings and the needs. And then other projects can be identified through district administration or school board directives, similar to the projects that we're talking about tonight. Again, on page 9 at the bottom, project prioritization, the biggest need is building envelope. We look at that as the top priority. If we can keep the weather and the elements out, the roof, the windows, and the walls, that's the goal. And then we look at the impact on safety and health, or health and safety, and then anything else that doesn't fit into those two categories would be contained in the plan. I'd like to point out on page 10 that the replacement value of our infrastructure is approximately $350 million. The cost per square foot to rebuild has increased to approximately $200 and $275 per square foot. Item 2, our facilities are approximately 42 years old, considering buildings that are only used by the district. Item 3 is MDE and generally accepted guidelines indicate that we should be spending approximately $3 per square foot on our annual LTFMR, and that would result in about a $5.6 million expense on maintenance and repair, factoring a 50-year life. I'd like to point that out because our current levy is slightly over $2 million, so we're almost a third of where we probably should be to to be compliant with suggested guidelines. And then in item 4, the last half of that is, if we proceed with what we're discussing tonight, based on current levy assumptions for the next 5 years, the resulting debt service to repay the bonds will result in less than 75 cents per square foot being spent on maintenance and repair for district buildings. And that holds true if we keep our levy where it is currently at slightly over $2 million. So there may need to be discussions on where that levy goes in the future. If we proceed to section 2, I've got the plan organized by fiscal year, so we'll look at FY18 and FY19, which are primarily the changes. And due to the additions, I had to stretch the plan out. It used to be a 10-year plan, but with these changes now, I probably have 14 years of projects because I added projects into year 1, which I'll call FY18, and year 2, FY19. I've highlighted in yellow the Rockridge projects, and at the bottom you can see the sum of the projects is $2.4 million. These are just general categories of placeholders. They're in no way indicative of all the work being done. I'd have to have 4 pages if we talked about all the work. But these are just placeholders and budgets for work that is anticipated will be accomplished with the LTFM bond proceeds for Rockridge. So it starts out with the standard, the health and safety management, environmental health and safety projects. Then I also have the rubber mulch replacement of $900,000. That's an estimate on my part. I'm hoping it comes in less. And then we have the playground at the bottom below Rockridge. We have the bond repayment of $790,000, which is estimated and it's slightly high. Total expenditures of $4.825 million, and it gives a carryover of $1.2,466,000. And then moving into budget year FY19, bond proceeds will be used for the Lakewood roof replacement project of $1.2 million. And the only project that I've added that is different from the plan that you saw last year is at Denfeld, and that's replaced failed ceiling finishes at Denfeld of $500,000. And if you look at the plan going out from FY20, 21, and 22, the debt service payment or the bond repayment is listed as a line item in the LTFM expenses, and it shows the balance available for carryover each year. Beyond what I've just discussed, the plan is the same as what you saw last year. I've just pushed everything out and I haven't added projects in. The last half of the document is sorted by school. Section 3, you can look at the projects by school. I don't think I need to go over, but I'm open to any questions on this, but it's sorted by Congdon, Denfeld, district-wide, and so forth. And that contains, or that describes what changes I made to the 10-year plan and what is being presented tonight for approval.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Member Welty.
Yes, Mr. Spooner, when was the Lakewood roof originally planned in the 10-year plan to be worked on? We'll be working on it in fiscal year 19.
Fiscal year 18. It would have been this summer.
So we're postponing it 1 year for other expenses.
Correct.
I would supplement that a little bit. I mean, we are postponing it not only for additional finances, but also, as Dave has reminded me, which every good facilities person would do, if we were doing that work this summer, we would have really needed to lock down our projects in January, February to begin the process of going out to bid and all that process. So if we decided that we wanted to do it this summer, it's really effectively too late for us to do that at this point.
Correct. We had so much discussion on Rockridge and the fall protection, it really impacted the plan and our ability to perform work this summer.
You have a question about the same thing? Okay, Member Harlan?
Thank you. I just want to make sure, how is the roof looking in the process? I know that we do make sure to take care of it, but are there any concerns heading into this next year that could make the pushing off of the roof a concern?
I'm not concerned. It doesn't mean we won't have some catastrophic hail or windstorm event, but today I'm not concerned that it will make it one more year.
Thank you very much.
Member Oswald.
Thank you, Chair Kirby. I have two questions. First of all, I noticed that when I counted up the projects by building that there are some buildings missing. And so there is no Lincoln Park Middle School projects, MacArthur, Piedmont, or Lester Park listed in here. So are you saying that they aren't going to have needs in the next 10 years?
No, this plan was in place a year ago and those schools were not contained. I've primarily focused on putting these new projects into FY18 and FY19 and pushing the plan out. And that doesn't mean that those schools you mentioned won't be in here because the plan gets evaluated each year. I'll meet next January probably. I'll meet with every principal and visit every site and evaluate every project that is in every year. For example, if you look from 2023 on out, this building is primarily the building being worked on, but as a board and district administration, we probably need to have the discussions on, does this building stay in the plan? What do we do? So this is a living document, as I mentioned in the beginning, and each year it's evaluated and projects are moved around.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I hope you understand my concern of not seeing those 4 buildings listed when we have an itemized project by building. And you would lead right into my second question because I was the one that mentioned last year at the extreme amount of the Hawks projects totaling over $18 million in last year's plan. But now this year, they're only $8 million. Can you tell me what happened to those $10 million worth of projects?
As I mentioned, with the bond repayment of $790,000, I had to shrink each year, and the length of time grew. So I could provide a plan that would go out to 2032, I think. So many of the projects have been pushed out because of our trying to make it work with the existing $2 million levy and the bond payment and fitting all the projects in. So there still is $18 million worth of work, if not more, that needs to be done to this building.
Thank you for that clarification. I wanted to make sure that we didn't just magically repair something, because I know your predecessor has had some sense of urgency about getting those done, and many of those projects, considering many of the structural issues with the building and different pet projects. So I hope that I trust in your judgment that you're picking and choosing the right projects that need the most attention first.
Right, and there is a large urgency with this building. It's a discussion we need to have because there are items that need to be dealt with soon, expensive items.
Thank you.
Member Welty.
Thank you, Chairman. Member Oswald kind of jumped to where I was heading, but the $10 million that we're not spending on hoax. I recall the $18 million was supposed to be spent during the red plan, and it's been deferred. So I guess all I can say about that is that this building will require some serious thinking, and I'm not sure what the answer is. Mr. Hassler, I have one quibble about the memo, and that comes in the description of the playground work as being fall protection, which of course we know that the rubber mulch is supposed to be better at mitigating falls, attenuating the damage to children. But it does seem to me that in light of the 2 years worth of lobbying to change the mulch, it wasn't so much fall protection that a lot of people had in mind, it was the potential hazards of the chemistry. So I just want to point out that not everybody would agree that the fall protection is the principal aim of changing our playgrounds, and I'll stick with my quibble there and not trouble you any further.
Member Harla.
Just make a brief note that when we make decisions, it's based on kids, and so the reason we have the mulch on the ground is so to ensure that there is falls protection. So ensuring that, I know that the idea around it is that, but the basis of it is about keeping children's brains safe and bodies safe. So just want to make sure to be clear on that. I do want to make a comment about the Hawks property, and something I've just really been in talking with community members about. I don't think this is necessarily something that's going to happen during my tenure on the board, but I do think that it is something we need to be discussing with our community to potentially have it be sold at some point in time. So I'm just going to go on the record for that and say that this would be a great opportunity for maybe our community to gather in other ways if it were potential for housing or historic tax credits, et cetera. I know that there could be potential. I'm wondering if there are potential parties that would be interested in reusing it or taking on some of that significant debt, because we're not really in the business of having to redo all of the historical pieces. And I really honor the history of it. My name is signed in the clock tower, and I love it. And it should be some place where our community can continue to gather, but it may not be the basis of where our schools need to be investing. We should be investing in classrooms. So, and understanding we have classrooms downstairs, but just the overall infrastructure of the city icon is very important. But also, I think could be a good community discussion about whose hands it should best be in.
Member Liffelkamp.
Thank you. Mr. Spooner, I appreciated page 9 and 10, just kind of the background on the process that you used, and I so appreciate that. My question is on page 12. I did go back to my notes from last year when we were reviewing the plans and that, and I failed to find where it says Denfeld replace failed stairwell ceiling finishes. Can you just refresh my memory? I didn't have a note on that. I had a lot of notes from last year, and I didn't have, and I just want to make sure I understand that because it's a $500,000 price tag. So,
sure, that project was added this year. The prior to start of school last year, we had some plaster on stairwells that fell down, and it was a safety hazard for students. Okay. And we actually we removed the plaster that had fallen down in one stairwell, and we covered every other stairwell with plywood prior to start of school. And our goal was to have done that project this summer, but it's not going to be done, so it's in next year's plan to be done.
Okay.
So it's 6 stairwells at Denfeld, ground floor to third floor. In the main building, if you're there sometime, if you look up in the stairwells, you'll see painted plywood, and there's to safely keep the plaster from falling down on students or general public or staff.
Okay, great. Thank you. I glad I didn't miss it last year, but thank you.
Member Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Kirby. A couple questions. First, could you remind me again how the limit to the $2 million limit, where does that come from?
Under the LTFM statute, we have a status that's a little different than what other school districts may, and that is that we were part of a different funding mechanism before LTFM existed, and that was called alternate facilities. My understanding, and fortunately I have a number of experts sitting behind me who can correct me if I'm wrong about this, I believe that we effectively are uncapped in terms of how that funding works for us. Now, it's not uncapped entirely. We need to have a plan that is laid out, as our LTFM plan is laid out tonight, that would be consistent with whatever levy it is that we would propose to charge to our community taxpayers. But that $2,057,000 figure is actually our approved levy for the next fiscal year, and it is within our discretion in future years to revisit that number. Right now, the assumption throughout this 10-year document, and this is something that Dave Spooner and I had multiple conversations about, the levy assumption that is built into this is a level tax levy. There's a lot to discuss and a lot of needs that are around our school district that would justify us perhaps revisiting that levy amount for future years. But in terms of any fixed cap, we are not capped on that levy.
Okay, thanks. And just to comment on that before I have my other question would be, I certainly would like to have a discussion on that as a school board. I know it's been, I think, traditionally been about $2 million, if I recall, all facilities before now, and I appreciate that, but it's never really been talked about as a board. And since we do have a lot of things that may be worth a discussion, having that discussion, particularly maybe given some of the talk we've had on Hawks here and stuff, I would like to entertain that. And I'm sure I'll remember to send an agenda item sometime to Chair Kirby. But in seriousness, it's something I would like to talk about. Not now, but in the future. Other question I've got on is on Stoll. That's the one for this year. Now, is that the same as item number 5 on our agenda? Is that a different thing? It's the same item. It is, okay. Okay, well then I'll leave the questions until we get to that. The other one was back on fiscal year 21. We have $750,000 for Rock Ridge, which is just a couple years from now, and it just seems like that should almost have been included in the repair of Rock Ridge, the $3 million that we're looking at, since it's right out there. Just wondering why that wasn't included. I know it's a couple years out. That helps us a little bit maybe as far as deferring doing something, but it still seems like if we were disposing of the property, we certainly wouldn't have that. So
I think Dave would have information on that he could share with you.
The roof at Rock Ridge probably has 3 years of life left into it. I think if we were to address all the needs at Rock Ridge, we'd be spending maybe $4 or $5 million right now. But we've built a budget. Basically, we're building the projects around the budget. We're making the school conducive to teaching and learning and meeting the needs of the Hills clients. And right now, the roof is not a need that has to be done. I mean, if we wanted to bond for more money, we could do everything and make it a brand new school again. But through discussions with district administration, it's been determined to do the needs, the high priority needs that have to be done to make it code compliant and acceptable for teaching and learning, and then in future years pick up the projects that we did not get accomplished this year.
Yes, Superintendent.
I just wanted to speak to the LTFM levy piece, that is part of the discussion that you have as a board when we set that levy in September. So that'll be a part of that discussion. Might be the best time for that.
Member Harla.
Thank you. There's just, can you remind me what CCTV components are? I know every other thing on the thing, on the list, I just want to make sure that I'm making an accurate decision.
That's our television systems, our closed circuit television. Okay. It's our recorders, different components. After about 10 years, items become obsolete.
That's fair. Thank you very much.
Member Oswald.
I just wanted to thank Member Harla for officially going on the record about her statement about Old Central. I remember last year at a meeting about this time is when I made the comment that does the community really want to spend $18 million of our $25 million in 10 years on this building? And I also remember the community outrage about possibly tearing this building down, which I will never advocate for, and I want to make sure that that's not in the community discussion. It's about who can best use this building, and if we aren't the ones for that, let's find a partner that matches that has the ability to take care of this place, because it's beautiful, it's historic, it means something to all of the community that can look up on the hill and see our giant clock tower. And I have pride that we're here, but we've come to the end of our usefulness of it if we can't take care of it. We can't let it crumble around us. And so we need help. And I hope that we continue to have a discussion as a board about that, because it is tough when we're looking at trying to upkeep all of our brand new buildings and maintain our red plan directions of taking care of these new buildings we built. And we have to put this one on hold all the time because it isn't as important as those spaces that a majority of our kids are in. So I hope any community conversation recognizes that it's not about getting rid of the building and tearing it down so it doesn't exist.
Member Lefferkamp.
Yeah, Mr. Spooner, can you just give me some examples of district-wide environmental health and safety projects? It's a line item throughout this, and just, again, some examples so I can share with the public.
Sure. Jason Barsness is our health and safety coordinator, and he works daily on, it could be student injuries or work comp, the ERCM emergency response plan. He works with the sites when they have injuries. He works with return to work for employees that are injured. He does everything that would be considered a health and safety coordinator's tasks for the district. So if there's any injuries, if there's hazards, if a teacher calls with a smell in a room, he investigates. He's our expert for health and safety. And those budgets are used for his salary, and they're used for training programs. Each employee, like bloodborne pathogens, lockout, takeout, the annual training that we have to do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Member Sandsted.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment about when we're talking big picture stuff here. I think that we find ourselves from time to time making decisions like we will be tonight that are essentially reactive to things that are happening or things that we see need to be done in the near term. And we certainly need to go forward and take action on these things, but I think we can do a better job taking a step back and being proactive and looking ahead to say, well, as Member Oswald and I were discussing, we need more seats for voluntary pre-K because there's parents like me who really want to send their kids and would be willing to pay until the legislature steps up and funds it to have public pre-K for our kids. And to take that big picture view of, okay, across the district, here are all our buildings. We have this old central exists, and perhaps we're not doing the best with it at this time. How are we going to fit kids into pre-K is, yes, we're putting the hills at Rock Ridge, but if we had a bigger plan in place going over the next 10 or 15 years, I think that's something that we should take a look at and be more proactive about instead of doing this on a incident by incident basis.
Member Johnston, I have a question. Coming back to budget year FY18, when you estimate $900,000 for rubber mulch, when we, the board initially agreed to do that, I think the estimates were much, much less. Then they came in much, much higher, and we said, oh, let's look at this again. And the question came up whether or not doing it over a 2-year period was cheaper, and so those were all of less expensive, I should say. That was an item. Is this fairly firm? You said it was an estimate. Where does that sit? If we were to bond for this and it were less than that, what does that mean?
You're correct on the sequence of events for the fall protection, and the 900,000 came from Luke and I just discussing what this may come in at. We're hoping it comes in less, especially considering the information that we've gathered from the parent groups and their contractors. So I'd be happy if it came in at 700, but it's a realistic number, and if it does come in at less, that will give us more carryover. It'll give us some cushion. This plan is very tight. We don't have a lot of contingency. We don't have a lot of extra room to work. We're doing a lot of work on a tight budget, and I really hope it does come in less to give us some cushion. if that's the question you were asking, Member Kirby.
Thanks. Mr. Hassler?
A couple of clarifications I'd like to make. Number one, all of the project-based numbers in here are estimates. And estimates are better in a close time frame than they are in a future time frame. I would just want all the board to bear that in mind, that as we walk forward year after year after year, as we get better information, we're going to want to refine our numbers. It's not likely that we'll get year 8, 9, and 10 without some of these numbers changing as we get better understanding on it. Also, maybe I misunderstood the financing that is proposed, and Steve Pumper will be talking to us about financing in a few moments. The financing that is proposed is not directly to finance the rubber mulch playground fall protection. The financing that is being proposed is to address the improvements at Rock Ridge, and it's also to address the replacement of the roof system at Lakewood Elementary. Now, the Lakewood Elementary project doesn't take place for another year now, but in terms of the financing, that we needed to finance that because the rubber mulch project replacement is impacting our LTFM, and basically is absent separate financing to do the Lakewood roof, we wouldn't have the money to do that. So it's really recognizing that a project, Lakewood, would otherwise not be able to happen because the playground fall protection is going to be drawing down the current LTFM revenues that we have.
Okay. Any other questions on this? All right, thank you very much. Maybe we can move on to Mr. Pumper.
Come on down, Steve. You're welcome at the podium or the chair, whatever your preference would be.
We'll wait till we hear all of this, I think, yeah.
Well, good evening, Chair Kirby, board members, Superintendent Gronseth. Steve Pumper with PMA Financial, and I've been here several times before, so happy to be here again and work with you on this project. The presentation that was included in your board materials, I'll walk through that with you, and that way you can certainly ask any questions that you may have. The first couple of pages I won't walk through in detail, only because Mr. Spooner and Mr. Hassler really framed those pages and what we're trying to accomplish. And that's financing the improvements to Rockridge School Building. I've broken down a little bit differently just because of requirements from the MDE of how you finance and what's available to, what type of financing is available to do projects such as Rockridge and the Wolf and the roof. So the remodel portion is estimated at $600,000. The repairs are estimated at $2.4 million. And even those are subdivided per state statute into $660,000 of what are classified as health and safety items, and $1,740,000 of what are classified as deferred maintenance items. And then the last item on that page is the $1.2 million estimated repairs at Lakewood Elementary. The next page, again, just reinforces what Mr. Hassler talked about, is that you currently do not have enough funding in your LTFM plan or in your capital facility plan to accomplish both those projects, and therefore you're looking for additional revenues. And the state allows you to get some additional revenue by selling what's called facility maintenance bonds and capital facility bonds, and so that's what we're proposing. If we go to page 25, that gives you a summary of both of those different bonds. So on page 25, we're looking at the $3,640,000 worth of GO facility maintenance bonds that are being proposed to be acted upon tonight. Again, it's comprised of $660,000 of health and safety items at Rockridge, $1,740,000 deferred maintenance items at Rockridge, $1,200,000 for the roof replacement at Lakewood Elementary, and then $40,000 the net cost of issuance of the bonds, and that's why we're asking you to issue $3,640,000 of bonds. Then on page 26, the statement there is that part of the work that is being done at Rockridge Elementary is $600,000 of remodeling type work, and that is not allowable under your long-term facility maintenance plan. It is, however, allowable under your capital facility plan, and therefore you need to issue different bonds for those, and those are capital facility bonds. And so again, $600,000 to do the work estimated at Rockridge Elementary for remodeling, and then $15,000 of net cost of issuance for that project. So therefore your total par amount is estimated at $615,000. So if we look at the people who are playing parts here and who are here at the meeting tonight, the issuer of these bonds, if the board takes action to go forward, is the District 709. You've retained the financial advisor, PMA Financial Securities, who I work for and represent. You're going to do this through a negotiated sale. That means you've already selected who the underwriter is going to be, and that's Northland Securities. And you're working with the Freiberg, Buchanan, Smith & Frederick law firm as your bond counsel. So we go to page 28. The resolution that is in your packet and that you will look... Oh, page 28. Is that...
Must be.
That's what shows on my thing. Oh, is it 27 years? Okay. It looks like we have two different copies of a document. So maybe 27. It says Resolution Geo Facilities Maintenance Bonds on the top.
I think we're one page behind you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
So page 27.
Okay.
Page 27 talks about the resolution that will be in front of you to take action regarding the Geo Facility Maintenance Bonds. And again, that's to finance the repair and maintenance portion of the Rockridge building and the roof replacement at Lakewood Elementary School. This is called a parameters resolution. So if you do take action on that tonight, you are giving authority to PMA Securities in the district to issue bonds that will not exceed $3,640,000. The reason it's a not to exceed is it's possible that we're able to achieve the net dollar amount that you need, the $3,600,000, by selling less bonds, depending on how the bonds are structured and at the date of the sale. The true interest cost on those bonds cannot exceed 3.5%. You are staying by resolution that it's going to be a negotiated sale with Northland Securities being the underwriter and purchaser of the bonds. And when that happens, when that sale date takes place, any board officer and the superintendent or the CFO, Executive Director of Business Services, is authorized to execute that bond purchase agreement. So that sale date likely will not happen on a board meeting date. What will happen is we'll have discussions. We'll be working with Northland Securities. We'll go out to the market, and those bonds will be sold if we meet the correct parameters. A bond purchase agreement will be done that same day. By board action tonight, you're giving authority to the superintendent or the Director of Business Services and one of the board officers to sign that agreement. I will be back then at your next regularly scheduled board meeting for the board to do what's called a ratifying resolution. And the authorization for us to get all that done expires this August. So it's not a very long time frame, because the reason we're doing it is so you can get this work done for this fall, or the majority of it. The roof is next summer, but certainly getting work done on Rockridge would take place. Then the next page, page 28 in your packet, is the same type of resolution, but this is for the Geo Capital Facility Bonds. Again, this is financing the renovation and remodeling portion at Rockridge Building. Par amount cannot exceed $615,000. True interest cost cannot exceed 3.5%. Once again, it's a negotiated sale with Northland Securities. Same type of deal. You're giving authorization to the superintendent and CFO, Executive Director of Business Services, and a board officer to execute the bond purchase agreement on the date that we choose to price the bonds. And our authority, again, expires on August 15, 2017, to issue those bonds. Page 29 is our estimate of what your financing costs will be, your interest payments, which is what Mr. Spooner has in his plan. And I know Mr. Spooner was a little more conservative, putting a little bit higher number in on what those bond payments would be. This is our estimate with a little bit of a cushion ourselves. if we were to sell the bonds in the market today. So it shows that you have roughly $766,000 of annual payments for a 5-year period of time for the long-term facility maintenance bonds. And you have roughly $130,000 of annual payments for a 5-year period of time on the capital facility bonds. I show you the estimated total financing costs down below. We believe that the true interest cost in today's market would be just slightly under 2%, 1.99%. In those previous pages, I told you your parameters resolution is saying it can't exceed 3.5%, and that's just so there's a cushion between now and when we actually go to the market to price those bonds in case something happens in the market. That the interest rate goes higher, we're still able to sell those and effectively get your projects done. But still having a cap, so there's some protection, that the board's placing on it. Then if we look at page 30, this is our projected timeline. So at today's meeting, what's on your agenda is to approve the long-term facility maintenance plan. As Mr. Hassler said, that is a requirement. And I'll mention something that Mr. Hassler did not, and whether or not you were selling these bonds, you do have to approve that plan on an annual basis, and I'll go back to Mr. Spooner saying that's another reason it's a living document. So you'll have to do that by July. You're doing it now because it's a step in order to sell bonds. You have to have an approved plan, but even if you don't sell bonds, you're going to have to approve that plan. It wouldn't have to be tonight's meeting, though. And then you're going to take action on GO facility maintenance bonds and the GO capital facility bonds. Tomorrow, May 31st, the district will submit the long-term facility plan to MDE for approval and the capital project description to the Department of Education for approval as well. Both those plans have to be approved and signed off by the Commissioner of Education for you to be able to issue those bonds. June 1st, so this week, the legal notices for both the long-term facility maintenance bonds and the capital facility bonds will be published in your legal newspaper. Not sure why this is by the state, but they just try to make it confusing. There is a 20-day requirement, a notice requirement for facility maintenance bonds to be published before you actually take action and can sell those bonds or take bids on projects associated with those bonds. And there's a 30-day requirement on capital facility bonds. Before that 30-day and 20-day, or actually in this case it would be after the 20-day, but before the 30-day requirement, we will have a rating call with Moody's to get your bonds rated. That will happen with district administration. Should the 20-day requirement, 30-day requirement go through without being challenged, on July 11th would be our tentative day that we would price the bonds. We technically could do it a week earlier because we would have satisfied the 30-day requirement, but that would be the week of July 4th, which is not a good week to issue bonds just because there are not players in the market. So we want to wait to get you the better pricing, even though it delays the issuance of the bonds by a week, but I think that's a smart move. So we'll do it the week of July 11th. Again, we're right now tentatively picking July 11th, but it could be the 12th or the 13th or any day that looks like the right day to price. July 18th is your regularly scheduled board meeting in July, so I would be back in front of you to have the board ratify the bond sale at that time. And tentatively, we're looking at a closing date on the bonds of July 31st, so that's actually the day you would receive the dollars. Now, you can start the projects before you receive the dollars, so that's just a cash flow issue, but you'll actually have funds in hand on July 31st. And with that, that's my presentation. I'll certainly stand for any questions you have, Chair Kirby.
Thank you. Any questions by Member Johnston?
Sure, thank you, Chair Kirby. Could you explain, Mr. Pumper, the relationship between yourself and Northern Securities? Could you, in addition to that, could you explain what underwriting means? And, for example, are they actually holding the, I'll call it a lease for the bond, for other words, or are they putting that out on the market and selling that to other people?
Yes. Mr. Johnson, thanks for the question. So the relationship that PMA Securities has with Northern Securities is no relationship other than, two professional businesses that both service school districts and cities and other municipal work as well. We act as a financial advisor, meaning you are our customer and our fiscal responsibility is to you by law, actually. The underwriter does not have a fiscal responsibility to the district. Their fiscal responsibility is to the people that purchase the bonds. So what their role and what our role will be on the day of pricing is that we will make sure as your financial advisor that the bonds are sold at a price that are reasonable and fair in the market on that specific day. Northern Securities' job is to market those bonds in advance of the date that we're looking for. Their role is to sell those bonds in the market. Can they purchase them and hold them? Yes, they can. But Northern Securities, the way they would normally work is purchase the bonds and have those sold to a third party on that day as well.
Member Welty.
This is a technical problem, a technical question that just builds off of the one that Member Johnston just asked. Northern Securities allegiance is, of course, the people who then buy the bonds. I presume they operate on a commission basis. Is there any way that the district can offer the bonding to a number of different securities arrangements, or is it have to be established that there is one? I'm just wondering what mechanism protects the taxpayers in trying to get the best deal, because I'm not sure Northern Securities motivation, fiscal motivation, sounds like to me they're as interested in sparing the taxpayers as we school board members are who have to face them.
Well, they are working for you at a set fee already, so they're working you at $4 a bond. So whether they execute at a whatever rate they execute at, I guess, won't change their compensation structure. It depends on how many bonds are sold is what they're going to get, paid for, of course. It is our job to make sure they're executing at a fair and reasonable cost in the market at that time. So we are the ones who are protecting your interest as well. Yep.
Member Harlan.
Thank you, Chair Kirby. I remember last year when we were going through the bond pieces. How is the market looking right now and into July? There's a lot of national, international speculation about when things are what's going to happen. Can you just give us a little bit of a forecast? About kind of your expectation. I know we don't have a crystal ball, but how are things looking right now, especially since the changeover in our national administration?
Well, even since we started this process with Mr. Hasser, when he contacted me about, hey, we have an issue, can you help us, with some financing costs? The bond market has done nothing but get more favorable for you. For like the last 30 days, it has been in your interest, has been dropping. So whether that will continue or not, we don't know for sure. The Fed has talked about raising the rates again in June, but it's certainly with the political climate, especially without getting too political, but the news that has come out with the president and different relationships and that has really affected the market in your favor to issue bonds. Now, again, we can't sell these until the first part of July, so what can happen between now and then, yours is right. That's a crystal ball piece I don't have, but it's very favorable market for you right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Member Sandsted?
Yeah, to kind of follow up on that, when we did the reissuance last year, we were told that doing that might perhaps help our bond rating, and I'm wondering if you're expecting to see that, if we already know where things are at and what our current bond rating is.
Yes, you have. You were downgraded the last time you were rated, so a year ago, and you also had a negative outlook assigned to your bond rating. Without enough history between the rating that was done almost exactly a year ago to now, there's very little chance that your bond rating will go up because there's not enough history to say there's market improvement. Even if your fund balance has improved, it'll only be 1 year's worth of history. What I'm hopeful for, though, is they'll remove your negative outlook. So that's what we can hope for.
And is that something that you would hope to see on June 28th during the rating call, or is that something that you would expect after this exchange?
June 28th is the rating call, which usually is about an hour to an hour and a half long conversation. What happens after the rating call is the person or people from the rate agency will take the information that he or she collects during that call and bring it to committee, and then a rating is assigned from that committee, and that's usually within that week. So you will have that information before the bonds are issued, and the board will have the information.
Okay. And to just clarify on what you said earlier, we were told that the transaction we did last year would potentially improve our bond rating, but in fact, we were actually downgraded after the transaction we did last year. Is that correct?
No. When you went to sell your bonds last year, you went through the rating process, and that's when they assigned your rating. The step that you took to issue those bonds, though, is a positive financial step that will do nothing but help the discussion on bond ratings in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Johnson?
What is our bond rating?
I believe it's a BAA. All right, you guys? Just kind of information.
Remember that, just to follow up on Member Welty's question, and sorry to put down the spot a little bit here, maybe somebody can answer me, but somehow Northern Security has been picked, somehow PMA has been picked. I have no problem with you, Steve, but who does pick that? And there's a cost here, looks like about $70,000 cost. Was that bid? How do we just decide that Northern Security is going to do this at that cost, or how do we decide even that we're going to hire you and what cost we pay you? I seem to have missed any kind of conversations like that. I don't know if we can answer me that.
I was going to pass that on to Doug, as he's had more of those conversations. We've gone a lot on our history. We have long histories with all three of the firms that are represented today, and they know our financials. We have built relationships over a matter of years. As far as bond counsel, they are the identified firm that represents us. We do have other firms, but they aren't necessarily bond counsel. And so in our discussions, we have continued our partnerships with them. I don't know if Mr. Hassler wants to address that further.
I can add to that a little bit. When it comes time for the bonds to be sold, with your authorization, when that time comes, the bond buyers out there don't necessarily know anything about this community. They don't necessarily know anything about Duluth. It is helpful to have Northland Securities that does know our school district, has been there and has sold bonds on our behalf as well, and being able to tell the story of what is happening in Duluth schools and why it is that that's a good transaction for bond buyers to enter into, rather than bringing somebody in that would not necessarily know where we've been and know where we're going.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, seeing none, then I would thank you for your information. We have 1, 2, 3 resolutions that we have before us. Do I have a motion to pass a resolution? It's under 4C. Oh, yeah.
Have somebody read the
Right. Never heard of it. Read.
Assign people to read them.
Yes. Can you read a resolution? We should pass these. The first one, I think, the 10 years facilities plan resolution by itself. So, Member Harlett, can you read that? It's on page 32.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will. Right. I move Resolution B-5-17-3452, approving the 10-year facilities plan FY 2018 update. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District 709, St. Louis County, State of Minnesota, that the 10-year facilities plan FY 2018 update, including the issuance of general obligation facilities maintenance bonds in 2017 in an amount not to exceed $3,640,000 in the plan, is approved. Be it further resolved that the superintendent and/or the CEO, and/or the CFO, executive director, or of business services shall submit such plan to the Commissioner of Education for approval of the plan and the school district's issuance of such bonds.
It's been moved by Member Harlett, seconded by Member Welty, to pass Resolution B-5-17-3452. Any further discussion? Yes, Member Oswald.
In reflecting on the conversations we've had earlier, and Member Johnston's revelation that in addition to the price tag of the $3.15 million price tag on Rockridge, there's an addition of the $750,000. Well, it's 3.1 plus the $600,000 in general fund money. That brings the amounts when we first started this conversation about Rockridge from, maybe 2.5 million to, maybe 3 million, and now it's 3.75 million. That disturbs me, being that this site has been targeted as the one and only place. And I would wish for Superintendent Gronseth to expand on his comment he made at our last board meeting, leaving many people such as myself guessing as to what you meant, that we were going to have further conversations about options with Rockridge, and then we didn't have further conversations. So I'm wondering if there is any further conversation that you meant to have that we haven't.
Superintendent?
I reached out to parties who were interested in the past, and they were no longer interested. So that didn't go very far.
Interested in buying Rockridge from us and us pursuing something else, or interested how?
Right, in purchasing either Nettleton or Rockridge. Since then, there have been two parties that have come forward with interest in some of our other properties, not Rockridge. And so we have not, I don't have any other plan for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I was left wondering why we didn't have that extra discussion you had promised. So I am concerned by the price tag involved in Rockridge. I do not understand how this is cheaper than a doubled lease of leasing Cobb School and fixing up Cobb School. Even the price, a lease of $300,000 a year, it doesn't match what we're going to have to pay and operate Rockridge in the black with the Hills being there. That being said, I fully support the Hills, and I know we need a space for them, and I am just very disappointed that we haven't had a discussion about other places to put them and service their needs in the best way possible. So I'm very frustrated that this has come down to approve it or else is kind of the way I'm looking at it. It's come down to we have to do this because there's a time limit now that we can't extend, and it doesn't sit well with me.
Yes, Superintendent?
Well, we had some discussion about Nettleton being a possibility, but the long-term expense far exceeds that of the expense of updating Rockridge for this property. And so I believe we did have some discussion on that in our last meeting. There's something else that I lost it in the second thought. It'll come back to me.
Member Sandsted.
Thank you. I'm going to be supporting this, but as I said before, I'm supporting this because it is a living document that we can modify as needed, and that I'm hopeful that we can have a larger discussion about Historic Old Central, housing pre-K, and whatever building adjustments we may need in order to resolve some of the inequity issues that we've been facing as a district. So put that as a caveat on my vote.
Yes.
I remembered.
Okay.
It was about Cobb. This all started because we were given notice that Cobb was being sold and we would no longer be able to use the building. That was before the proposed rent increase, and that they were in the process of trying to sell the building, and now I understand that they have gotten further down that road. I don't think that they're done with their due diligence period yet, but staying at Cobb was not an option that we had.
Member Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Kirby. In general, I really haven't liked the way this whole process has went with the Hills. It used to be Woodland Hills, now it's the Hills. People don't know that. I like the Hills. They're a very competent group. They do amazing work, and I support them 100%. Just to give a little bit of background and kind of adding to what the superintendent said, and a lot of people may not know the situation. The superintendent talked a little bit about it. The Hills came and approached us. At the same time, Many Rivers Montessori came and approached us, offered us a very good price for Rockridge. In the meantime, of course, we then were negotiating with the Hills, and of course we want to do the right thing for them. That's only the right thing to do as a community and as one of our affiliates. And then in the meantime, of course, they basically turned around and appear to have sold the Cobbs. They seem like they did pretty good business. Okay, they're a business too, and I don't begrudge them that. It just seems like they came out kind of ahead on this deal, and we weren't quite. Seems like we didn't really come out ahead. And now, as Member Oswald said, it seems like we have to pass this. We have to build a new school for them because they've already indicated and already sold their other school. So it doesn't seem like the way it should have worked. I did put down some additional prices on this sale. We got $3 million price on that. We do have to add to that, even though that sale didn't go through. It was almost $1 million sale. That's still what it's evaluated as. So I'm assuming that the price of the building is worth that much money someday. When we originally talked about it, this was going to cost us money. We have to now have transportation. We have to put food service in. We have to have custodial. We have to pay the electric bill, all those kind of things. Now we got another $750,000 for a roof. So I added all those numbers up, and assuming the last 20 years, that's almost $7 million for 20 years. That's about $330,000 per year. Again, I'm not making this simplify. I'm not using any time value of money calculations here, which I should be, of course, but I'm just doing this on my paper. And if we could have been paying them $300,000 a year for rent, that's, as you can see, we are losing on this deal. And I'm just bringing that up because that's why I think that we did not negotiate very good with them. I'm not blaming anybody here at all. I'm just saying it seems like they negotiated better than we did. And then there are all these other things that we didn't know about. We didn't know about this. We didn't know about the mini reverse Montessori. We didn't know they're going to buy their building instead of buying our building. So the whole thing is a little bit, I don't know, I just don't like it. I do have to bring up another issue. I brought this up several months ago, and I did find a resolution passed on May 17th, 2011 about closing Rockridge Elementary School. And that was passed by the board. And it seems like we do have to rescind that resolution because it says that closing Rock Ridge Elementary School is necessary and practical and is a close effective the end of the 2010-2011 school year. And to me that means, and as I said before, I have no problem rescinding this resolution, but it seems like it's something that we really have to do if we're going to get forward with that, because we said back in 2011 we were going to close the building. After a large involved public comment period and court recorders and all kinds of getting legal people involved to do that and following the law. So again, I'll just pass this on to the chair. This is a copy of the resolution that was passed. And I suppose you could argue over the exact wording of it. Are we closing Rockridge Elementary School if we're selling it to the Hills? I don't know. I think that we should just be straight and at least rescind that resolution. Other things, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the 10-year plan. That's what this resolution is about. Despite all what I've said, I'm going to be voting for this because, as Member Sands said, and Member Spooner, it is a living document, and it has been changing a lot every year, and that's the way it should. Even though there's some things in here I don't like, including the way things worked out with Rockridge. I think the rubber mulch is way, way too high still as far as the price goes. And again, we're going to get talking about this $450,000 for a stove. That's even higher than the bids that we have. I don't know where that's all coming from, but again, we'll get to that, I guess, in a little bit. I guess, are we going to get to that later? Are we going to get to that later, or is that something we're not really going to even, are we going to be approving that bid? Because I do have some comments on that bid.
We'll come to that after these resolutions.
That's something that we will vote on. So at that point, I'll quit talking about that, the 10-year plan.
All right. Member Harlow?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to make a note that I'm hearing what you're saying, Member Johnston, in that if you were just looking at the rent cost at $300,000 a year for the next 20 years, that we lose money. But if they, in the last couple of years, just decided they were going to double our rent, it doesn't mean they can't do that in 5 years from now. So then that'd be $600,000 a year. And they could do that again. And so what we can do as a district, and one of the main things that we need to do, is ensure that we have classrooms and buildings that are safe and set for our students to be in. What we do know is that Cobb School is not, there may be another entity that's looking at purchasing it that's not within our purview at the moment, because we need to look at what we need for these students and what we need to promise these students. And what we promised a long time ago with the long-range facilities plan was that all students would have up-to-date classrooms, and that they haven't had that at Cobb. So for me, this is an equity issue, and it's ensuring that our students have the facilities that they need in order to learn, especially students that are coming from tougher backgrounds as well too. So I do support updating these buildings, and just want to make sure, so now we know and can plan for those costs moving forward versus just hearing in a couple of years, oh, we'll double your rent, and if we don't, we'll become a charter school. So we have a firm relationship with this organization that is glad to be housed in our organization, as well as we can control our costs moving forward.
Superintendent, did you have?
I just wanted to clarify, I don't think you meant to say it, but we're not selling Rockridge to the Hills. We're maintaining, we're keeping it, and then they will be leasing part of the building from us for some of their staff. And probably just a slip, but I too was going to say they were considering being a charter school, but we really have a renewed partnership with the Hills. We've been working pretty closely together and designing new programming around trauma-informed care and trauma-informed instruction. And I'm proud of the partnering that our staff is doing with their staff and working together in a new way. And looking forward to moving to a new space that they feel better about, because a lot of this conversation came from not being happy in the Cobb property. There's also, we are taking on the transportation and the food service portion of that. That's not something that we did some of the transportation before, but certainly not all of it. And we didn't do the food service, but there are also funding streams that take care of those as well. So that's not just an additional expense. There is some revenue on that side that comes with it. And I think it is better to not be in a leasing situation where we own the property and that we're then more in control of that part of the expense. And we'll have some income to help pay for those added costs with the spaces that they're leasing in the building. We did contact the state about what it takes to reopen a building that we currently own and operate it as a school. And there's much less process around reopening a school than there is closing a school. And so we have looked into what that takes, and when the time comes to move into the school, the state said that would be the time to take that action, because that is when we're technically reopening the school, because we'll also have to change the address. And there's some talk about maybe updating the name as well from Woodland Hills Academy to something else that is not decided yet, but that would better fit that they serve more than the Woodland Hills residents.
Thank you. Member Welty.
I'm going to give the audience a chance to groan at a groaner. We find ourselves between a rock ridge and a hard place. I did want to mention the issue of equity since Member Harla brought it up. Equity and finance are inextricably linked together. We are currently using $3.4 million of money that should go to the classroom to pay off bonds. That all has to do with how past school boards have structured our debt repayments. One of the principal means by which we were going to take that pressure off of the general fund was to sell schools. And since I've been on the school board, we've had 2, maybe 3 opportunities to sell buildings that we could have turned into a reduction of this impact on our general fund. We've turned those opportunities down, and so our equity issues continue as a result of our financial determinations or our unwillingness to sell properties. I agree with everybody else. We have an opportunity, we have an obligation rather to continue housing the students over at the Hills, and they'll be using Rock Ridge. And I'm just sorry that things turned out the way they have, but that's life.
Member Oswald?
I just wanted to follow up to Member Harla that I agree in nearly everything you mentioned about equity and making sure that it's equitable with all of our other resources. But I don't see this as a question of equity. I see this as a question of, was this the best site? And that's, neither here nor there at this point, because we don't have time to debate that. We can provide the equity and the state-of-the-art classrooms in just about any place of our buildings, and we had options, but we didn't explore them fully to the point that we did Rockridge.
Member Sanstead?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on Member Welty's made the comment regarding payments coming from the general fund, and just wanted to make it very clear, because it's clear to me here that if we go forward with all of this today, we will be expending further money from the general fund for bonding related to the smaller amount coming to support the remodeling at Rockridge. And so that looked like $131,000 per year coming out of the general fund. I just wanted to make sure we were all clear that that's what's happening tonight. So when it gets referenced in the future, that's what we're voting for.
Quickly, Member Oswald.
I was just wanting to ask Mr. Hassler to clarify the actual predicted cost of us operating Rockridge, because I remember from previous conversations you said we're actually going to be running in the red because we have the building open slightly. And I just wanted to know what that be reminded of what that ballpark figure was, just so that we know that we're going to have a bond payment to finance this plus this annual cost from our general fund.
It's been a while since I've done those calculations. I may not be recalling them exactly, but what I was looking at that time had nothing to do with financing costs. We now are dealing with financing costs here. What I was looking at that time was what staffing cost will we have for that building, because we'll now need an engineer, we'll now need a custodian. What will our utility costs likely be? We have some utility cost in that building now because we have continued to heat the building, not at levels that it would be at if we occupied it with 90 to 100 kids plus staff, but taking all those things into account, and also taking into account that we would no longer have a lease payment that we'd be making to Woodland Hills. I think it was somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $75,000 annually that we would have additional expense to do that. And that was prior to the point that we had anticipated a financing, as we're discussing tonight. Though the financing would be something we would be working with for a defined period of time under this proposal for 5 years.
Superintendent.
Mr. Hassler, do you recall, were those calculations with the updated boiler that would be more efficient, or was that based on the current utilities that are in there?
It just would have been based on our current use. So yeah, if we were able to squeeze some savings with more up-to-date heating and cooling technology, that'll be to our advantage.
Member Johnston?
You shouldn't have brought that up. I have to comment on this. For example, Piedmont and Lester Park, their utility bills are running almost 3 times what they were before they were rebuilt. So just to remind people that don't expect to get any savings when we put new HVAC systems in there. In fact, it will probably cost us more, like our other new schools have done.
All right, seeing no other lights, it's been moved by Member Harless, seconded by Member Welty to approve Resolution B 517-3452, the 10 years facility plan. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? This passes 7-0. Member Welty, can you read Resolution B 517-3450? Please.
If I could ask for some coaching here, I would be happy to read both pages.
33.
I don't think that's necessary.
There are 2 pages. Is it necessary for me to read all of them, or can I shortcut this after the resolution just mentioned that there are a number of sections?
I would do that.
Section 2 is probably important.
2? You see any others, mark them down here. All right, this will be a short version of the lengthy resolution. Mr. Chairman, I move resolution issuance of general obligation facilities maintenance bonds, Series 2017A. Now be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 709, Duluth, located in St. Louis County, Minnesota. The district as follows. Section 1 having to do with the authority for this. Section 2, the bonds themselves. The board hereby determines that it is necessary, expedient, and in the best educational interest of the district's pupils and residents that the district issue, sell, and deliver its general obligation facilities maintenance bond series 2017A, the bonds, in the maximum principal amount of $3,640,000 pursuant to Minnesota statute section 123B, .595 and Chapter 475 for the purpose of providing funds to renovate the Rock Ridge Elementary Building, 2, replace the Lakewood Elementary School roof, and 3, pay costs associated with the issuance of the bonds, the project. In addition to that, as we go on through sections 3, we get to Section 3.305 on the next page. If the pricing committee has not approved the sale of the bonds to Northland and executed the related bond purchase agreement by August 15th, 2017, this resolution shall expire. Section 4 says begins the repayment of bonds. The form, specifications, and provisions for the repayment of the bond shall be set forth in a subsequent resolution of the school board. Resolution. There's an additional section, Minnesota School District Credit Enhancement Program, but I'll skip that, knowing that the rest of you can read it at your leisure. But, Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution B-5-17-3450, dated May 30th, 2017.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I second it. Moved by Member Welty, seconded by Member Oswald to pass Resolution B 5-17-3450, issuance of general obligation facilities maintenance bond series 2017A. Any discussion on this? Member Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I'm actually going to make a motion. And I'm hoping that we'll get a second on this because I like to have some discussion. People are going to probably ask me why I'm doing this. I make a motion to delete Northern Securities as underwriter and select a new underwriter.
Second. For the sake of discussion.
All right. Moved by Member Johnson, seconded by Member Welty to remove, where is that, on Section 3.01, to remove the first sentence, essentially, the district's administrative staff is authorized and directed to work with Northland Securities as underwriter for the bonds. We can't. The second sentence. And the second sentence. Northland will purchase the bonds in arm's length. So you wish to remove those first two sentences of that section?
Correct.
Okay, and seconded by?
It's also in section 3.04.
First.
3.04. 3.05.
If we just say where? Let's see, they are in essence, you just want to remove Northland Securities as the underwriter to the bonds.
Correct.
Okay. So it's been moved by Member Johnson to remove Northland Securities as the underwriter of the bonds as described in this resolution, seconded by Member Welty. Is there any discussion on this? Member Johnston.
Sure, I'll start this out and maybe end it out. Thank you, Chair Kirby. When we sell bonds, an underwriter, we have to have trust and confidence in those people. I don't have trust and confidence in them. I did mention this to Mr. Hasler and the superintendent. We had started having a brief discussion on it, didn't go anywhere for the reasons why. But I'll just give two reasons. I will not talk about some of these people got us into this financial mess that we're in. The black hole of the budget that we have, that we can't even replace tire mulch without having an act of God almost. But I'm going to skip those for a later time. There's two instances I'm going to mention. One was a meeting last June. I asked, I believe it was Northland Securities about the peculiar financing scheme that they came up with for our building debts. And they made a statement that said, well, everybody does it. There's a $480 million building project going on in St. Paul. The exact same way that happened to us here. Well, I checked that out. Bill Kiso and MDE, at least at the time, that was false. There was not a $480 million building project that was done. That was false information that we were given by these underwriters. The second issue that I'm going to have is a cease and desist proceedings by the Securities Exchange Commission, dated September 30th, 2015, in the matter of Northern Securities Incorporated. I think that is an issue. While they did not follow procedures, I think we as a school, we have to have trust our underwriters to be able to follow procedures. And when they were found to have a cease and desist, I'll pass this on to the chair. There's 7 other pages of it. I think to me that disqualifies them from entering into this kind of a important transaction. And for those 2 reasons, that is why I'm asking this board to find a new underwriter.
Member Welty.
Thank you, Chairman. I seconded for the purpose of discussion. I was troubled to hear that the assurance that St. Paul was doing what we had been doing with $640 million turned out not to be perhaps as accurate as Northern Securities indicated to us last year. I certainly will vote for this. I have no desire to remove Northern Securities from this. I did ask the question about the compensation. I'm certainly not an expert in finance, but it does not strike me that for this fairly simple product that we are offering to the markets that Northern Securities would be unable to do this, and I trust that Mr. Pumper will, as he indicated, be monitoring how this is offered. And I will say, too, that I did get a chance to read the cease and desist order from the SEC, and I noted that in the particular case that we were looking at, it was Northern Securities that had turned themselves in for what appeared to be a fairly modest mistake. And whenever somebody turns themselves in to the SEC for having made a mistake, risking whatever the SEC will do, I take that as an indication of integrity. So, for the time being, I have no trouble with this. Be happy to keep Northern Securities, even though I offered the second to discuss this motion. And I'm afraid at some point I'm going to have to become much more of a student of high finance to make sense of all the bonding that we've been doing.
Member Hessler, Mr. Hessler. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted the board to be aware that I had looked into the circumstances of the cease and desist order as it relates to Northland Securities. And what I have found is that was part of a process that the SEC was involved in, an initiative that was really touching all areas of the municipal financing industry all over the country. And Northland Securities did enter into a settlement, as Member Welty indicated. They did self-report the issues that are described in the cease and desist order, but they were not the only underwriter that was subject to procedures like that. Around the country, there were a total of 72 underwriters that were part of that process, and if that is a disqualifying factor for us in employing an underwriter, there's not very many to choose from, because it's a who's who list when you look down at all of the, there's 3 different press releases that the SEC put out. I've read them all. They identify all of the underwriters by name. Northland is on that list. It's a lengthy list, and we do need an underwriter for this transaction.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights, there's a motion made by Member Johnston, seconded by Member Welty, to remove Northland Securities as the underwriter for these general obligation bonds. All in favor of this motion, say aye. All opposed? No. Nay.
No.
Motion fails 1-6. We then go to the motion to pass resolution B517. We'll pass these, I think, individually. 3450. Recommended that the issuance of the general obligation facilities maintenance bonds, Series 2017. Can you tell me who? I can't remember who.
Moved by Welty, seconded by Oswald.
Moved by Member Welty, seconded by Member Oswald. All in favor of this? Member Johnston?
Sure, I will be voting for this somewhat reluctantly. I was going to make a motion to find a new legal counsel. I will hold that for another time. I think everybody knows my opinion, many people's opinion of the poor financing scheme that we're in the school, done by all these people that did this bond. But unfortunately, I will be voting for this. I certainly wouldn't have, actually I probably didn't vote for it when we originally passed the $300 million bonds that they put together. That is the reason now we're having serious financial problems because of the way they set this up. Anyway, I won't make that motion today.
Thank you. Then all in favor of Resolution B517-3450, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 7-0. Next we move on to Resolution B517-3451, page 35, which is similarly extensive. Member Harlow.
I was going to say, do Harry to do it again?
He did such a fine job, yes. Member Welty.
I'd be honored. Is there anything that you could recommend, Superintendent, that I might
I was kind of thinking
stress?
the
Same thing.
same sentences that you did before.
Is that what, 2?
Section 2, and then the 305 on the bottom and 306.
306, 306. Right here.
I just, I had looked ahead thinking that I was going to be called on to read it, and so had made my own remarks on it. I would like it just publicly to be read, also section 601 and 602, if I could include that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have resolution number on your stuff?
What's that?
Is it this one, 37?
Bottom of 37.
No, under Exhibit A.
B17.
51, as opposed to 50. Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution B-5-17-3451. It is a resolution for the issuance of General Obligation Capital Facilities Bond Series 2017B. Be it resolved by the Board of Independent School District Number 709 Duluth, located in St. Louis County, Minnesota, the district as follows. Section 1 has to do with the authority. Section 2, the bonds themselves. The board hereby determines that it is necessary, expedient, and in the best educational interest of the district's pupils and residents that the district issue, sell, and deliver its general obligation capital facilities bonds Series 2017B, the bonds, in the maximum principal amount of $615,000 pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 123B, period 62 and Chapter 475 for the purpose of providing funds to 1, repair and renovate the Rock Ridge Elementary Building, and 2, pay costs associated with issuance of the bonds of the project. Going on past the sales of bonds to point Section 305, if the pricing committee has not approved the sale of bonds to Northland and executed the related bond purchase agreement by August 15, 2017, this resolution shall expire. Section 4, repayment of the bonds. The form, specifications, and provisions for payment of the bond shall be set forth in a subsequent resolution of the school board. And the next, Section 5, has to do with Minnesota School District Credit Enhancement Program. Going on to Section 6 that Member Leffler-Kemp would like me to read, having to be the notice to voters on a referendum. 601, the clerk shall publish a notice of intent to issue the bonds in substantially the form attached hereto as Exhibit A as soon as practicable in the official newspaper of the district. Section 602, if within 30 days after May 30th, 2017, a petition is filed with the board calling for a vote on the proposition of issuing the bonds signed by more than 15% of the registered voters of the district, the bond shall not be issued until the question of their issuance has been authorized by a majority of the voters voting on the question at the general or special election called to decide the question. The percentage set forth above shall be determined with reference to the number of registered voters of the district on the last day before the petition is filed with the board. There is a Section 7 and an Exhibit A having to do with the notice of intent to issue capital facilities bonds pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 123B.62, Independent School District, number 709, Duluth. Mr. Chairman, I move the resolution that I've just read to you.
It's been moved by Member Welty and seconded by Member Leffler-Kemp to pass Resolution B-5-17-3451. Any discussion on this? Member Sandstead.
I just have a technical question. I'm wondering why we have Section 6.01 and 2 in this resolution, but not in the one prior, if it has to do with payment out of which fund or what the difference is.
Mr. Hassler.
Bob Tofty can correct me on this if I'm wrong. The statute that authorizes these bonds has that referendum provision in it. The statute that authorizes the LTFM bonding does not have referendum language in there.
Member Johnston.
Sure, thank you, Chair. I will not be making any motions on this one, but I'm going to be voting against this. The reason why is this is coming out of the general fund, and I think that we've had too much money coming out of the general fund. Also, at least according to one of the other Moody's reports, this is a very small thing. It probably won't impact our bond rating, but when bond ratings are not guaranteed by tax levy, that lowers our bond ratings, and more important is I just don't think that, I know we need to pass both of these. And me voting against this is kind of silly, but I am because I do not think that we should be paying for anything out of the general fund, period. We can't afford it. We have a deficit, over a $2 million deficit this year, and not even counting the potential teacher negotiations. And this is something we can't do. And so I will be voting no, even though it's somewhat of an impotent vote, because we voted for the first one. But I feel I have to make a statement that this is the wrong way to build a project, which is kind of dubious in the first place from an economic point of view, and here it is. And remember, this is just not, the way we're doing it is going to last 5 years. Okay, maybe it's better than spending $600,000 on one whack like we were planning, but still, $600,000 plus whatever the interest is, $650,000 over the next 5 years is money that I would like to put into addressing the inequity issues that we have in the school and many of the other issues that we have, and including keeping our staff employed, not cutting our clerical staff, not cutting principals in our schools. The list could go on and on, but that's why I'm voting against this.
Superintendent, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I wanted to say that the reason that there are the two separate issues, some of the expenses in remodeling Rock Ridge are covered under LTFM or long-term facilities maintenance funding, those are things that already exist and need to be replaced or updated. And there are some things in the project that do not already exist, and that would include things like making smaller rooms out of larger rooms. We're putting in walls that aren't currently there, and so they can't be covered under the long-term facilities maintenance, and that's why the general fund comes into play, because that is the only option we have for paying for those right now, is to go from general fund. And Member Welty spoke to it, saying, you know, it's better than taking it all out of 1 year and spreading it over 5 years, because if we were to take this out of 1 year, we would have to make reductions to the tune of $615,000 for the coming year. And this way we offer a little more stability, a little more longevity in the level that we're able to go. So it's the 130 or somewhere about that over the next 5 years, rather than take it all out 1 year and then put it back the following year.
Thank you. Member Welty?
Thank you for giving me the credit for saying that, but I believe it was Member Sandsted that might have made that comment. Oh, it was Member Johnston.
I'm sorry.
I'll just make this point. Yes, the fact that we're taking this piecemeal out year by year, a few $100,000, makes it bearable, barely. I've already addressed the issue of the money that's already coming out of the general fund, which to me is tragic. And I have no objections to Member Johnston voting against this. In fact, I'm glad somebody will be voting against it. But again, we're between a rock ridge and a hard place. So I did it twice. I have no shame. Cut it off. You're supposed to say, at any rate, I'll be voting for this.
Okay. Member Sandsted.
I just wanted to observe that I agree with Member Johnson that I don't want to be paying for this out of the general fund, but I do appreciate that this is a 5-year term thing, that, you know, some of us may even still be here when we're done with this, as opposed to some of the other financing that historically has been problematic that we're tied to for another 15 or 20 years ourselves. So 5 years is a little bit more palatable.
Member Oswald?
Thank you, Chair Kirby. I'm going to symbolically vote against this, only because I know that by the expressed opinions it's going to pass. But I'm voting against it only because I don't know if there was a way we could have avoided this, because we didn't explore all of our options completely as to where we could have placed these programs. And so I don't want anything extra coming out of our general fund, because we need those teachers, we need those supplies, we need those classrooms. We need more pre-K. We need to reduce class sizes. We need so much, and it's every little bit counts. And so I'm voting against this in the hopes that we can figure out how to cut these small expenses so we can add to the betterment of our school experiences.
Member Johnson, do you have a final comment?
Sure. Just Member Welty is between Rockbridge and hard place. Sorry, that is funny, and so I appreciate the humor. We have to have some humor in this. Unfortunately, his analogy. What kind of humor is that? Whatever it is. What is it?
A pun, I think.
A pun? Is that a pun? Anyway, it's good, but unfortunately, it's true too. I would like to comment Member Sandsted for reminding me that this is certainly a whole lot better than what has happened to us in the past. And so I guess I should be happy about that. I am, but still, it is still coming out of the general fund. I know, Superintendent, I know why we had to do that. There's no question on that. I understand that. But again, I'm voting against this just because I don't want any more money coming out of the general fund.
Seeing no more lights, it's been moved and seconded to pass Resolution B 5-17-3451. issuance of general obligation capital facilities bonds, Series 2017B. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
This passes 5-2. Thank you. We will then move to the Stowe Elementary playground improvements. It's on page 38 of our packet. I'd like to thank you people for coming tonight and being available. Mr. Spooner, do you want to address this first?
I will, Chair Kirby. Thank you. This project was actually planned on being done this summer, and the scope was defined, and we were ready to go. But it isn't going to happen this summer. Or I mean, it is going to happen this summer. But this layout of the playground is a mirror image of Lester Park or Piedmont. It's our established playground standard. It's also addressing a major issue that we have at Stowe with water infiltration into the building and into two doors, because the elevation of the whole playground property is about 1.5 feet higher than the building. So all the water runs off the playground and it comes into the building during certain times of the year, spring thaws or in heavy rainstorms. So this project is both to replace the equipment, correct the drainage issues, update the playground to our current district established standard, as well as remove the non-compliant pre-K equipment in the front yard, if you're familiar with that. It's basically going to take that non-compliant equipment out, leave the drainage and put wood fiber, and they can use freestanding equipment until we can determine how the pre-K program or the pre-K playground will be renovated, if at any point. But Pam Reese and her staff are happy with what we're planning on doing. So this playground, if approved, once done, will look just like, as I mentioned, Lester Park, or you could pick a playground. It's our same district standard.
Thank you. Member Oswald? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I saw Member Welty's laid on first, so I just assumed I wasn't listening. Sorry. I guess my comment on this is that it's striking to me that I spoke out so confidently as to A+'s landscaping bid for removal of the mulch at $1.2 million and believing that to be overinflated, and then knowing that the project at Stowe was guesstimated to be about $160 million, or $160,000, sorry, that would be a lot, $160,000 in the original 10-year plan, and so this is coming in at a lot more than that. And I know that they only have a certain portion of the total bid. So I guess I'm just saying that I recognize that even if they were to bid high, they're still the lowest bidder. And at least if we're overpaying for something that we shouldn't, at least that money's going locally. So this playground needs to get done and taken care of for the Western Geary New Duluth community.
I'd like to add that the 10-year plan did have a sum of $230,000, which was low, as you can tell, but that's where Kerry had estimated it.
Member Welty?
Mr. Spooner, this project for Stowe is more extensive than the projects that are mostly mulch replacement. Can you give us a sense for the things that will be done for this that will not be done for the other playgrounds, and the rough estimate of what proportion of that cost would be relative to just the mulch replacement?
I don't know if I could pull those figures together in my head right now, but I can certainly explain the differences. The mulch replacement projects are going to have the rubber mulch removed, the elevation cut new drainage put in, poured in place rubber around the concrete footings for fall protection, and then engineered wood put in. At Stowe, we're going to start with a clean slate. Everything will be wiped off from the bituminous court that's all broken up with the tilted basketball hoops, the light poles that are tilted over, the broken play equipment. It's actually 2 playgrounds that are going to be worked on. The elevation will be changed so that the grade slopes away from the building. There'll be new subsurface drainage put in to collect the water to catch basins. We'll eliminate the problem that we've had of water entering the building in 2 entrances. And it will have new play equipment that will match our other buildings that will be compliant with our standards.
Member Leffler-Kemp.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Spooner, if I missed this when I had to step out, but the flagship contracting to furnish and install playground equipment, is that the company that we've used in the past for our other equipment? And my second part of that is there is handicapped accessible or handicapped appropriate equipment that will be installed as well, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And the reason why I broke this up was I used the state contract for the equipment to save the tax and the overhead and profit, the markup that the general contractor would mark the equipment up. Flagship is the installer, the certified installer for landscape structures, which makes the equipment, which is on all our district playgrounds, and it will have the same equipment that you've seen at other sites.
Member Johnston.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. What's the relationship between this and the $445,000 item and the long-range plan?
Those are the same projects.
It's what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, that's the same project. The $445,000 is the sum of this project that we're talking about right now.
Okay, so it'll actually be less than that? It'll actually only be whatever the $310,000 is?
No, it's going to be the bid amount is everything but the equipment. In my letter, I've identified that on page 38, I've identified in the second paragraph that to achieve the most cost-effective price contains both work that was bid along with direct purchase. The district is going to direct purchase the play equipment and the installation off the state contract. And that direct purchase is approximately $135,000 for the play equipment and installation. And as I mentioned to Member Loeffler-Kemp, I did that to save us the tax by direct purchasing and to save us the overhead and profit that the contractor would have made because they would have contracted with Flagship, the same vendor. So we're directly buying from them off the state contract.
The other question is, what's the involvement of TKDA?
TKDA was our design professional. They're the ones that designed the site work and the project itself. They're our architect or engineering firm.
Okay. Again, I'm going to have to $445,000 for a playground. I mean, there's something wrong there. I mean, that exceeds the cost of a custom-built, fairly good house. And I don't know where they came up. I don't know what kind of specs they put in there to get this so high, but there's something wrong there. And a couple other items to back up my contention is, again, I went back to even Johnson Controls estimate. As high as they were on everything, they had Stowe being $103,000. All the other playgrounds are somewhere in the $60,000, $70,000, $99,000 price range. The total cost for all the playgrounds on the long-range facility plan was $750,000. Now we're doing one playground for $445,000 and $737. Again, looking at the Johnson Controls, the description of it here, it says replace existing playground with new equipment to meet the needs of enrollment. replace surface material and replace the edging as well. Okay, I know we have some drainage, but we are already getting static about the high cost of the mulch replacement from people. We're hearing that more and more, and we really have to start containing some of these costs somehow. I don't know really what to say other than that $445,000 for a playground is highway robbery. And we know this has to be replaced, but we've got two other previous estimates here that are a fraction of that cost. And again, I don't know what's going on, but all I know is it's a really, really expensive house in Duluth, custom-built house in Duluth.
I can respond that the JCI estimate didn't include all the work that we are doing. The work that we are doing is required, the drainage work. It's more substantial than just a playground. We have a major issue with water infiltration into that building that needs to be resolved, and this is going to resolve it. As far as the scope of the work, I wouldn't recommend anything less than what is in front of you, whether the pricing is competitive or not. We had 4 vendors that bid on it. I did my best to package it in a manner to save the district money, but I can't think of any items that I would reduce the scope to save cost. I think it's a Chevrolet. It isn't a Cadillac project. The playground is a portion of it, and that's equal to other buildings. And I also wanted to add that for Member Oswald, I think two school board meetings ago, I reviewed playground costs, and MacArthur alone was $340,000 some odd dollars. So we did spend a substantial amount during the long-range facility plan on playgrounds.
Well, Laura Mack was estimated at $99,000 in the long-range facility plan. I mean, you buy houses, there's drainage systems, there's sump pumps, there's pipes all over going into that. Houses that cost half of that price have 10 times as much drainage systems on it. Again, I do not understand how a playground can cost this much money, and there's something wrong here.
In general, construction has gone up a lot since our long-range facility plan. We built our schools at a time when construction was relatively cheap. I'll call it cheap. Things have gone up 7-8% a year, and things are just more expensive now. I'm not sure how to respond. Things have gone up substantially since we did the long-range plan.
Member Lefferts Kemp.
Just a general comment that I meant to add when I made my other comments, just that I also wanted to say I appreciated that your recommendation is with a local contractor and a local company, so appreciate that.
You say we had 4 bids on this project.
Correct.
Just off the top of your head, if that drainage problem wasn't there, would that have reduced it substantially?
I think the drainage probably maybe 100,000 is related to the drainage work.
Okay.
And we've got the Stowe playground is just a disaster. If we took a field trip out to Stowe, I think Member Oswald mentioned how bad it is. It needs to be done and it needs to be corrected, but the drainage issue is really the big issue. That whole entire playground and bituminous area and sidewalk, they drain to the building. We're having water infiltration. That leads back to my original topic on the 10-year plan about building envelope. The building envelope is it's the most important thing we have to maintain on our property to keep our buildings in a good condition for the next 50 to 75 years, and we have a water problem at Stowe, and this is going to address that issue.
Thank you. Member Harlow.
I just have a process question, so I don't see the point for a motion. I haven't seen like a motion or a second on this. Do we need a formal vote on this, or is it just, I'm trying to make sure that we are following process.
To accept the bid, right.
So I'd like to make a motion to accept the bid for A+ Landscaping LLC, recommended in a letter based on the lower responsible place bid, plus add alternate for one for the sum of the $23,900 for the total of $310,761 as provided in the response to bid number 1259 Stowe Elementary Playground Improvements. Included in this recommendation is the school board chair authorizes to sign the contract documents reflecting the terms of this agreement. I'm just reading the recommendation from our packet.
It's been moved by Member Harla, seconded by Member Leffler-Kemp, I guess. Further discussion. Member Johnston.
Just to respond to Mr. Spooner of being in the construction industry as well. New houses don't go for $444,000 unless it's a little bit over the average by quite a bit. And the average median price of houses, the median price of a house in Duluth, last I heard, selling a house, I mean that includes anything that's there, as last I heard was about $150,000, somewhere in there. So here we are, we're paying 3 times the average house price of a house in Duluth for a playground. I'm going to be voting against this. I have to, but before I do that, of course we have to replace the playgrounds. Of course we have to do important stuff, but there is a limit where we have to have some kind of financial accountability. And this is not financial accountability. And no, there is no justification for something this high.
Member Sandstead.
I just want to add that my son gets to spend at least a lot of time on the playground at school. This year he goes out with his kindergarten class first thing in the morning, he goes out at recess, and he goes out after school in Key Zone, and I'm delighted with that, and I want our kids to be outside as much as possible, and so I see an investment in upgraded playground as a good thing for our kids. Last comment.
Member Harlow?
No. I said that was a great last comment.
All right. Seeing no other lights, we have a motion by Member Harlow, seconded by Member Leffler-Kemp, to accept the bid 1259 Stowe Elementary Playground Improvements. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? This passes 6-1.
Motion to adjourn?
There is a motion by Member Harla and second by Member Oswald. Sandstead to adjourn. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.